Culture jamming is basically any type of activity that takes already existing and circulating images and then tries to invest them with some sort of critical content. Culture jammers tend to be activists associated with a bunch of different kinds of movements. Movements against consumerism, anti-globalization movements, anti-corporate movements. And so culture jamming becomes just a tool that anybody within any kind of movement can use to try and get their message across. Because of the nature of what culture jammers do, they play with heavily circulated images that already have meaning to a lot of people. It's one of the inherent dangers that they face is that the message they're trying to convey then is getting lost. Because people might confuse that Absolut vodka subvertisement, that advertisement that's supposed to be making fun of Absolut or pointing out the health problems of Absolut. People might confuse that for an actual advertisement for Absolut vodka itself. And that's the risk they run with playing with images that have already been heavily circulated, that already have meaning to a lot of people. Culture jamming has become another kind of creative outlet for advertising because a lot of advertisers will actually try and mimic culture jamming techniques. Subvertising very basically is a rearranging of the image in a pre-existing text to draw out some sort of criticism of the company, maybe of the advertising campaign itself, of consumer culture in general. A successful jam, though, is when people get it. And that's what's hard to determine. How successful a jam is very hard to determine. I guess winning people's minds, because that's ultimately what culture jamming tries to do, is it tries to change minds. Culture jamming doesn't try to change the world directly. Obey has become his brand. There's a billboard above Mohawk, where Mohawk is for the longest time, that had that face on it. And I never really understood what it was. I thought it was a brand. I thought it was like a clothing line or something like that. What is the goal of a particular culture jammer with their work? And I read his description was he wanted to challenge people to think critically. And so you look at what is the goal of this group or activists with their work, and it's really kind of difficult to kind of draw this line between when does the oppressed become the oppressor without really being able to nail down, well, what's he fighting against? And he talks about using images that people are familiar with and then trying to get them to think critically about their lives or about society. Adbusters, though, is, I think, a much clearer example because their whole thing is anti-consumerism, and yet they create products and to sell to the public, most notably the Black Spot sneakers. And so they can really come under that charge of, well, wait a minute, you're saying that you're anti-consumerist, and yet you're selling this glossy magazine. You're selling these sneakers. You want to start up restaurant chains, Black Spot restaurant chains. But still, you got to look behind. What are they really trying to do? And it becomes so much more complicated when you really try to get to the bottom of what their goal is. And this is why I'm saying it's so difficult to find out, well, when do they become the oppressors? And I guess it happens when their way becomes the way, becomes the dominant way, and that everybody's doing it. Change happens with the masses because that's where the power resides. It really they might have the money, control the means of production, have control of communication, but really power is with people, a lot of people.